The cold bit through Sarah's thin shawl like 1,000 tiny knives. She stood on the corner of Main Street, watching the respectable women of Cedar Falls hurry past with their eyes averted, their whispers following her like ghosts. 6 months ago, she had been one of a merchant's wife with a warm home, a full pantry, and a future. Now she was something else entirely, something people crossed the street to avoid. Her hands trembled as she pulled the shawl tighter, though it had nothing to do with the November wind howling down from the mountains. It was shame, pure, suffocating shame that burned hotter than any fever. But shame didn't feed her 2 children waiting in the drafty room above the feed store. Shame didn't pay the landlord who'd be back tomorrow with his greedy eyes and grasping hands. When Thomas died in the mill accident, he took everything with him of the store, their savings, their standing in the community. The debts came next, circling like vultures. His business partner claimed Thomas owed him money. The bank seized what little remained, and Sarah, left with 7-year-old Emma and 4-year-old Danny, discovered that a widow's options in 1889 were heartbreakingly few. She tried everything respectable first, took in sewing until her fingers bled and her eyes burned, but it paid pennies, worked as a laundress until she collapsed from exhaustion, begged the church for help until Reverend Morrison's wife told her that perhaps this was God's way of teaching her humility. The final blow came when Mrs. Henderson fired her from cleaning houses because her husband looked at Sarah in a way that made his wife uncomfortable. So here she stood, preparing to do the unthinkable, the unspeakable, the only thing left that anyone would pay money for. Her first client was supposed to meet her at 8 o'clock behind the old granary. She'd never even learned his name, arranged through whispered intermediaries and desperate negotiations. $20. Enough to keep the landlord at bay for another month. Enough to buy food and medicine for Danny's cough. Enough to sell another piece of her soul. The town clock struck 7:30. Sarah started walking toward her appointed destination, each step feeling like she was descending into a pit she'd never climb out of. The streets grew darker as she left the respectable part of town. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She was so lost in her misery that she didn't see the 3 men until they surrounded her. Well, one of them drawled, whiskey thick and menacing. "What's a lady doing in this part of town all alone?" Sarah's blood turned to ice. These weren't clients. These were predators who took what they wanted without paying. She tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. "Please," she whispered. "I have children." "Then you shouldn't be out here," another one laughed, reaching for her. The gunshot cracked through the air like thunder. All 4 of them froze. Sarah looked up to see a mountain of a man standing in the shadows, a rifle raised and pointed directly at her attackers. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to block out the stars. A thick beard covered half his face, and his eyes, even in the darkness, held something that made the 3 men step back. The lady said no. His voice rumbled, deep as an avalanche. "Now move along before I decide this rifle needs using." They scattered like rats, cursing and stumbling over each other in their haste. Sarah stood frozen, unable to process what just happened. The man lowered his rifle and took a step toward her. She flinched. He stopped immediately. "Didn't mean to scare you, Mom. Name's Caleb Mitchell. Got a cabin up in the high country. Came down for supplies and heard the commotion." "Thank you," Sarah managed, her voice barely audible. She should leave, should run back to her children. But her legs wouldn't work, and suddenly the enormity of what she'd been about to do crashed over her. A sob tore from her throat, then another, until she was crying so hard she couldn't stand. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. The mountain man Caliber held her awkwardly, like he wasn't sure what to do with the weeping woman. "Hey now," he said softly, "you're safe." "They're gone." "I can't do this," Sarah gasped between sobs. "I can't, but I have to. I have no choice. My baby." "So what's your name?" Caleb asked gently. Sarah Brennan." "Mrs. Brennan, when's the last time you ate?" The question was so unexpected that her crying stuttered to a stop. I don't know. Yesterday." "The day before?" The children need it more. Caleb made a sound deep in his chest, a disapproval mixed with something that might have been anger, though not at her. There's a diner 2 streets over that doesn't ask questions. Let's get some food in you, and you can tell me what's driven you to this. I can't buy, I didn't ask you to. Something in his voice, here gruff but kind, firm but gently, made her trust him. Or perhaps she was simply too exhausted to fight anymore. Either way, she let him guide her to a small establishment where the proprietor greeted Caleb with familiarity and didn't bat an eye at Sarah's disheveled appearance. Over beef stew and fresh bread are the first real meal she'd had in weeks. Sarah told him everything. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. Thomas's death, the debts, the dwindling options, the hungry children, the landlord's ultimatum, and finally, the terrible decision that had brought her to that dark street corner. Caleb listened without interrupting, his weathered face unreadable. When she finished, he sat silent for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his large hands. I got a proposition for you, Mrs. Brennan, he finally said. And before you think the worst, it ain't that kind. I live alone up on Mitchell Mountain. Been alone since my Martha died 4 years back. Place is big, she and I built it hoping to fill it with children that never came. I got good land, a garden, livestock, timber rights that pay decent. What I don't got is someone to help run it. Can't pay much in coin, but room and board for you and your little ones would be secure. Good food, warm beds, and nobody bothering you. Sarah stared at him. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. Maybe that's exactly why, Caleb said. World's got enough people taking advantage. Figured it could use more folks offering a hand up instead of a handout. Besides, his voice softened, Martha would have wanted me to help. She had a kind heart. Couldn't stand seeing people suffer when there was something to be done about it. People will talk. The scandal people up here already think I'm half wild, Caleb shrugged. And the few neighbors I got mind their own business. You'd have your own room, your children too. Separate quarters. My word on that, Mrs. Brennan. It was too good to be true. Too easy. Too convenient. And yet, looking into his steady eyes, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months, a hope. I need to think about it, she said, though her heart already knew the answer. Fair enough. I'm staying at the boarding house tonight, heading back up the mountain tomorrow afternoon. You got until noon to decide. He paid for the meal, walked her back to her room above the feed store, and tipped his hat. Whatever you choose, Mrs. Brennan, don't go back to that street corner. There's always another way, even if we can't see it yet. Sarah climbed the stairs in a daze. Inside the tiny room, Emma and Danny were sleeping curled together under the thin blanket, their faces gaunt but peaceful. She knelt beside them, brushing hair from their foreheads, and made her decision. The next morning, she packed their few belongings into the old carpet bag. She used her last $2 to pay the landlord through the end of the week with a note saying they were leaving town. Then she took her children's hands and walked to the boarding house. Caleb smiled when he saw them, a genuine expression that transformed his rough features. Made your choice then? We have, Sarah said firmly, squeezing her children's hands. If the offer still stands. It does. Come on then. Let's get you home. The journey up the mountain took most of the day. Caleb drove the wagon while Emma and Danny sat in the back, their eyes growing wider as civilization fell away and the wilderness closed in. Sarah sat beside Caleb, trying not to think about what she was doing, taking her children to live with a complete stranger in the middle of nowhere. But when the cabin came into view, her breath caught. It was beautiful, a large, sturdy log structure nestled in a clearing, with smoke curling from the chimney and mountains rising majestically behind it. A barn stood nearby, and she could see chickens pecking in a yard, a cow in a pasture. It's wonderful, she breathed. It'll do, Caleb said, but she could hear the pride in his voice. That first night, he showed them to their quarters, 3 bedrooms in the east wing, each with a real bed and clean linens. There was a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a pantry full of supplies, and a sitting room with a fireplace large enough to stand in. After months in that freezing room above the feed store, It felt like a palace. Sarah cooked dinner, her first chance to truly cook in so long, while Caleb showed Emma and Danny the animals. She heard their laughter through the window, pure and bright, and had to stop and wipe her eyes. Over the following weeks, they settled into a rhythm. Sarah cooked, cleaned, and helped with the garden. The children bloomed in the fresh air and good food, their laughter filling spaces that had been silent too long. Caleb proved to be patient with the children, teaching Danny about animals and helping Emma learn to read from the books his wife had left behind. He was also, Sarah discovered, a man of his word. He treated her with unfailing respect, never coming into her quarters uninvited, never making inappropriate advances, never asking for anything beyond honest work. In return, she transformed his bachelor establishment into a real home, cooking meals he praised lavishly, mending clothes, organizing the chaos of a man living alone. But it was the small kindnesses that undid her, the way he carved toys for the children, the morning he surprised her with fabric from town to make new dresses, the evening she found him reading to Danny when the boy couldn't sleep, the firewood that appeared outside her door before she needed to ask. 3 months passed. The snow came, blanketing the mountain in white silence. They were snowed in more often than not, the four of them creating their own small world. Sarah taught the children their lessons while Caleb tended the livestock. In the evenings, they gathered by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes reading, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. It was during one of these evenings that Emma asked the question that had been haunting Sarah's mind. "Mr. Caleb, are you going to be a new papa?" The silence that followed was deafening. Caleb's eyes met Sarah's across the room, and she saw her own confusion and longing reflected back at her. "That's not. We haven't," Sarah stammered. "Would you want me to be?" Caleb asked the children softly, but his eyes never left Sarah's. "Yes." Both children shouted with the certainty only children possess. "Then I reckon," Caleb said slowly, "that depends on what your mama wants." Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. She thought of that desperate woman on the street corner 6 months ago. She thought of the shame, the fear, the certainty that she'd lost everything worth having. And then she looked at this man, this good, kind, unexpected man who'd offered her salvation without asking anything in return. "I think," she said carefully, "that I'd like that very much. But Caleb, you should know I don't love you, not yet. I'm grateful, and I admire you, but I won't lie and sire I know," he interrupted gently. "And I ain't asking for love, Sarah. But maybe, in time, we could grow into it. Like planting seeds in spring and waiting for summer." The tears came then, but they were different from the desperate sobs of months ago. These were tears of relief, of hope, of beginning again. "Yes," she whispered, "I'd like to try." They married in early spring, a simple ceremony with the circuit preacher who made rounds through the mountain settlements. It was nothing like Sarah's first wedding, and no fancy dress, no church full of people, no elaborate celebration. Just 4 people standing in a cabin as the sun streamed through the windows, making promises. But this time, Sarah meant every word with her whole heart. The years that followed weren't easy, a mountain life rarely icer, but they were good. Caleb was patient as Sarah learned to trust again, to open her heart again. She was patient as he learned to share his space, his life, his carefully guarded emotions. The children thrived, growing strong and confident, and slowly, like seeds growing into summer, they found love, real love. Not the desperate transaction she'd almost entered into that night, but something built on mutual respect, shared hardship, and choosing each other every single day. On their 5th anniversary, as they watched Emma and Danny play in the yard while their newborn baby, a daughter named Martha, slept peacefully in Sarah's arms, Caleb pulled her close. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Coming up here with a stranger?" Sarah thought about the woman she'd been, a broken, desperate, standing on that dark corner ready to sell the last thing she had. She thought about the man who'd stepped out of the shadows not to take but to give. She thought about the life they'd built together from absolutely nothing. "Not for a single moment," she said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "You saved me, Caleb Mitchell." "No," he corrected gently, kissing her forehead. "We saved each other." And in the golden light of that mountain evening, with their children's laughter floating on the breeze and their baby warm between them, Sarah finally understood the truth. Sometimes salvation doesn't look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like a mountain man with kind eyes standing in the shadows, offering not judgment but a hand up. Sometimes it looks like choosing dignity over desperation, hope over surrender. Sometimes it looks like home,